"Daddy, he was in Mommy's belly with me." That innocent sentence, spoken by Felipe while pointing to a dirty, alone boy curled up on the sidewalk, made my heart race in a way I'd never felt before. Time seemed to stop, and everything around me lost its meaning for a moment. Did I hear that right? How could my son say something so absurd and profound at the same time? Who was that child who seemed invisible to the rest of the world? Welcome, I'm Marcos Paulo, the storyteller. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and comment from which city you are watching. The night was cold, and the wind seemed to whisper old secrets through the empty streets. The yellowish streetlights flickered, casting strange shadows on the stained walls. I held my 5-year-old son Felipe's hand tightly as we crossed the sidewalk we had walked countless times before without surprises. But that night, something would change our lives forever. Then he stopped walking, nearly pulling me down. He gripped my hand tightly, his eyes wide, and pointed to the dark corner of the alley. His little finger trembled, and his innocent face seemed overtaken by a strange mix of fear and curiosity. "Daddy," he whispered, almost imperceptibly. My heart raced, though I didn't even understand why. I followed his gaze, confused. There, leaning against the cold wall, was a dirty boy with torn clothes, hugging his knees as if he wanted to disappear. His eyes shone in the dark, huge and full of pain. He seemed to be the same age as my son, but had such an old, tired air that it hurt just to look at him. "He was in Mommy's belly with me," Felipe added in a choked voice. It was as if the world had stopped for a second. I felt a crushing weight on my chest. The air vanished from my lungs. What did that mean? What did this unknown boy have to do with my late wife, with our family? Everything spun around me. "What did you say, son?" I asked, trying to control the panic, but Felipe didn't answer. He just kept staring at the boy in the alley, his eyes full of tears, as if he saw much more than I could understand. It sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, it felt like I was facing something supernatural. The homeless boy slowly lifted his face, locking his enormous eyes on us. There was a sad gleam, almost a silent cry for help. Then he gave a faint smile, so fragile it seemed ready to break apart in the cold air. My stomach turned. Who was he? Why did Felipe speak of him like that? In the distance, a dog barked, breaking the grave silence of the street. The sound echoed off the walls, bringing me back to reality. But nothing seemed normal anymore. I felt an almost desperate need to protect my son from that boy, or to protect the boy from something I didn't understand. I was confused, scared, and overwhelmed by a strange sense of guilt. "Let's go home, Felipe," I tried to say, but my voice faltered. The homeless boy continued to stare at us, unmoving, as if he was waiting for something important. Felipe squeezed my hand tighter. His eyes were glazed over, and silent tears began to run down his flushed cheeks. At that moment, I felt our lives had crossed an invisible line. Something much bigger than I could imagine was beginning. And deep down, I was sure that boy was not there by chance. What did he mean? What did my dead wife have to do with all of this? I still didn't know, but my heart screamed that this story would be much darker and more revealing than I could ever imagine. My name is Marcos. I'm 34 years old, and until a few months ago, I swore my life had found some balance. I lost my wife, Helena, 2 years ago after complications in Felipe's birth. Since then, all I've done is try to keep our little world standing, balancing my tiring job as a refrigeration technician and the enormous task of raising such a sensitive boy. I've always been a practical guy, the kind who prefers numbers and screws to feelings. But since Helena left, I had to learn to be love, affection, everything. And as much as I tried, sometimes I saw in Felipe's eyes a longing that hurt even me, the longing for a mother he barely knew but felt every day. We lived in a simple neighborhood, in a house I'd earned with much sweat. The rent was affordable, the neighbor was calm, and Felipe loved running around the small yard with our dog, Tobias. On the outside, it seemed like a normal life, maybe even a happy one. But inside, I carried a hole that nothing could fill. Felipe was always a sweet, imaginative boy, too much for my taste. He invented invisible friends, talked to himself in the yard, laughed at the wind. I tried not to worry. It's just a child's imagination, they said. But sometimes he said things that froze my blood, like when he told me that Mommy would visit him at night to sing lullabies. It was hard. I worked all day and came home exhausted, but still tried to sit on the couch with him, listen to his wild stories, and pretend everything was fine. What I wanted most was to see Felipe grow up happy, even though my heart was always half broken. My greatest desire was simple, to make sure he never felt as alone as I did, but I didn't have the power to change much. The salary barely covered the essentials, the bills were always overdue, and the weight of being both father and mother at the same time crushed me a little more each week. Still, every day when I woke up, I silently promised Helena I would do the impossible to give our son whatever he needed. The pain of loss would wake me up in the middle of the night, sweating cold, expecting to find Helena by my side. But the empty pillow was a cruel reminder that she was gone, taking a part of me with her. It was just us now, me and Felipe, trying to rebuild ourselves, each in our own way. That's why that strange night when Felipe pointed to the boy in the alley and said those absurd words, my world nearly fell apart again. I could deal with overdue bills, exhaustion, even loneliness. But I wasn't prepared to face ghosts from the past, especially if they came in the form of a living child, with eyes that seemed to carry an ancient secret. The next day, after that strange encounter, I tried to go on with life as usual. I made coffee, sent Felipe to play in the yard, and headed to work. But my mind kept hammering the image of the boy in the alley. His eyes were a silent scream that haunted me. That night, I dreamt of Helena holding two babies in her arms, crying down a dark hallway. I woke up with my heart racing. When I picked up Felipe from school, the teacher called me aside. Your son was very isolated today. He said he was talking to his brother during recess, but there was no one there. A chill ran down my spine. I smiled weakly, brushed it off, but the fear began to take shape inside me. That night, Felipe slept with me. In the middle of the night, I woke up to him speaking softly. Daddy, my brother is cold. He doesn't have a blanket. He doesn't have a home. I opened my eyes and felt my stomach drop. What, brother, son? I asked, barely able to speak. Felipe just smiled sleepily and went back to sleep. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to my son's peaceful breathing, while my mind tried to find logic in all of it. Was it just imagination, or a strange way of dealing with the absence of his mother? But something deep inside me screamed that it wasn't just that. The next day, Felipe disappeared from the yard. I nearly had a heart attack when I realized. I ran through the neighborhood, calling for him like a madman, until I found him sitting on the sidewalk, holding the hand of the same boy from the alley. The two of them were so close, they looked like real brothers. When I approached, the boy shrank back, looking at me in panic. He seemed ready to flee. Felipe, on the other hand, got angry. Don't scare him, Daddy. He's my brother too, remember? I didn't know how to respond. I picked Felipe up and stared at the other boy. The pain in his eyes was so clear that I almost cried right then. I returned home with Felipe in my arms, but the look of the homeless boy stayed with me like a weight. I felt like I had failed in some terrible way. Maybe I was responsible for that pain, even without understanding how. When we entered, I sat on the couch, trembling. Felipe caressed my face and said with the naturalness of someone talking about a blue sky, he also came out of Mommy's belly. He just got lost. I dreamed of her telling me. It was like being punched in the chest. Reality seemed to spin. My breath faltered. At that moment, something inside me broke. It was as if the past was coming back to demand an old debt, one I didn't even know existed, and I was sure that this was just the beginning. In the days that followed, the presence of the homeless boy became almost routine. Felipe would sneak bits of bread for him, and they would sit together on the curb, talking and laughing softly. I watched from the porch. My heart knotted, not knowing how to act. One afternoon, the neighborhood revolted. Mrs. Lourdes, the neighborhood gossip, came knocking at the gate with a disgusted look. "Mr. Marcos, this is outrageous. Your son playing with that kind of child. He'll end up catching a disease, bringing lice into the house." Her words cut through me like a knife. Some neighbors joined in, making cruel remarks. They said I was irresponsible, that I was putting Felipe at risk. An older man even said that if he saw that boy hanging around our sidewalks again, he would give him a beating. My blood boiled. Meanwhile, the boy stood there across the street, listening to everything. His hunched shoulders trembled, his gaze fixed on the ground, as if he wanted to disappear in shame. Felipe shouted, "Don't talk like that about my brother!" And that only made the situation worse. Mocking laughter echoed. I held Felipe in my arms, but I felt small, powerless in the face of the world's cruelty. The boy looked at me with so much sadness, it seemed like he was asking, "Are you going to abandon me too?" I wanted to run to him, hug him, tell him everything would be fine, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the boy turned his back and started walking, alone, down the stone street. Every step he took felt like a blow to my chest. Felipe cried softly, holding my neck, repeating, "He has no one, Daddy. He only has us." When I went back inside, I felt like the worst human being in the world. I kept remembering the boy's eyes, that strange guilt that wouldn't leave me. It was as if my soul screamed that I owed him something much bigger than food or a blanket. I spent the night awake, sitting at the edge of their bed, watching the restless sleep of my two sons. Every sigh from Daniel was filled with fear. Every time he moved, I feared he would wake up and run away, convinced he didn't belong anywhere. In the morning, I made a decision. No matter what the rest of the world said, I was going to fight for Daniel, as I had fought for Felipe since the day he was born. I wouldn't let anyone tear our family apart, even if it was the last thing I did. At breakfast, I looked at the two of them and said, "You are my children. No matter what happens out there, no one will take that from us." Felipe smiled, radiant. Daniel let out a sob and hugged me so tightly I felt my chest break and rebuild at the same time. That afternoon, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. No return address, just a crumpled envelope, handwritten. Inside, there was a short letter with handwriting that made me break into a cold sweat. "He's really yours. Take good care of him. Helena loved this boy too." The words scrambled my mind. The letter trembled in my hands. My heart seemed to beat out of my chest. What did that mean? How did someone know about our secret, if there was one? And the most frightening thing, who sent it? I showed the letter to Felipe. He read it slowly, frowning, and then gave a half smile. "I told you, Daddy. Mommy never forgot about my brother." The serene way he said it left me speechless. It was as if, for him, everything had made sense from the beginning. That night, I knocked on Father Antonio's door, the local priest. I had always respected the man. I told him everything, or almost everything. He listened in silence, his face grave, and then took my hand firmly. "Sometimes God writes stories that we don't understand. Maybe this boy is with you for a reason greater than you can imagine." I left there carrying the weight of doubt, but also the lightness of someone finding a little faith. Daniel was waiting for us at home, with an anxious look in his eyes. When I entered, he ran to me, as if he feared I might abandon him too. I picked him up, just like I had so many times with Felipe. In the following days, I started discreetly investigating Helena's past. Going through old boxes, I found a notebook with strange notes, prenatal bills, ultrasound pictures, but something didn't add up. There seemed to be records of 2 babies, 2 little hearts. It was then that I realized my wife had carried twins. But in the hospital, they only handed me Felipe, and no one ever explained anything properly. Back then, I was so broken I accepted any version of the story. The revelation hit me like lightning. Daniel was my son, my blood, Felipe's twin brother, lost in some error, abandonment, or crime I still needed to understand. But now, none of that mattered as much as the fact that he was finally home. I called Daniel and sat the 2 brothers in front of me. "You're both the children of the same mother, the same father. You are brothers, not just by heart." but by blood. And I promise I will protect you both until my last day." I'll never forget Daniel's relieved cry when he heard that. The news spread quickly. Someone, maybe one of the toxic neighbors, spread rumors through the street that I had stolen the boy from somewhere. Soon, social workers and child protection officers came, wanting to understand who Daniel was and why he was living with me. They knocked on my door one cold morning. 2 official cars stopped in front of the house, drawing the attention of all the gossiping neighbors. Daniel clung to my leg, trembling. Felipe stood still, protecting his brother with his little body. The social worker spoke in a voice that was too sweet to be sincere. "We need to take the boy for a while until we clarify everything. It's protocol." My vision darkened. No, they couldn't take him from me now, after everything, after finally having our family back. I tried to argue, show them papers, the mysterious letter, even the old ultrasound images, but they just kept repeating the same empty speech. Daniel cried silently, his face buried in my leg. Felipe screamed, "Don't take my brother!" Then I did the unthinkable. I locked the gate and stood in front of them, arms wide. "You're not taking him. If you want him, you'll have to go through me." My voice came out firm, even though my heart was pounding. I was never one for confrontation, but for my children I would face the world. The commotion attracted more neighbors. Some were filming with their phones, others murmuring that I had gone mad. But in that chaos, something unexpected happened. Father Antonio appeared, walked up to us, and placed his hand on the social worker's shoulder. "I know this family. This boy was abandoned. Here, he has love, a roof, food. Where was the state when he was sleeping on the sidewalks?" The priest had a calm strength that began to dismantle some of the hostility. The woman took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable. A policeman accompanying the scene seemed divided. He looked at Daniel, clinging to me, then at Felipe, who was sobbing, begging, "Don't take my brother, officer." The man sighed, scratched his forehead, and shook his head as if to signal retreat. That day, I managed to hold my world together by a thread. But I knew that this wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the first big confrontation of many that would come. The following weeks were hell. I received subpoenas, had to go to court, answer endless questionnaires. I felt humiliated, as if I were a criminal for wanting to protect my own son, but I stayed strong for them. Felipe had anxiety-induced fevers. Daniel started having nightmares almost every night, murmuring, "Don't leave me, Daddy, please don't leave me." I held both of them in my arms, trying to convey a sense of security I didn't have. At the trial, I faced cold lawyers, psychologists who didn't know me, social workers who only saw papers. But when they asked me to speak, I looked at Daniel and Felipe in the back row and said everything with my heart wide open. "This boy isn't just a case for your files. He's my son, the brother of my other son. I failed before because I didn't know, because no one told me the truth. But I won't fail now. If you want, you can arrest me, but you will not separate them again." A heavy silence filled the room. The judge, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, stared at me. Then he looked at Daniel, who was staring at him, holding Felipe's hand with tears frozen in his eyes. It was such a long moment that it felt eternal. Then the judge took a deep breath and said, "Based on the psychological reports, Father Antonio's testimony, and the documents you brought, I find no reason to separate them at this time. This process will continue, but until then, the boy remains in your custody." A collective cry erupted. Daniel ran to me, throwing himself into my arms. Felipe was jumping, laughing and crying at the same time. I collapsed right there, hugging my sons, feeling the weight of months of fear finally dissolving. From the corner of the courtroom, I saw some people moved. Even the social worker discreetly wiped a tear. Maybe, for a moment, they saw beyond the protocols. They saw just a father trying to keep his children together. We left the courtroom hand in hand, me in the middle, with Daniel and Felipe on each side. For the first time in a long time, I felt that the worst was over, but the most beautiful part was yet to come. Back home, we were greeted by neighbors who, embarrassed, brought cakes, sweets, and even toys for the children. The victory in court had spread a different aura through the street, as if people finally understood that our family wasn't a freak show. Felipe never left his brother's side. They played in the yard until late, inventing stories of knights and dragons, as if all the weight of the world had been lifted from their small shoulders. Daniel smiled for real, a smile that lit up even the darkest corner of my soul. But not everything was so simple. There were still bureaucracies, follow-up visits, endless reports. I had to prove every day that I was capable of taking care of them. It was exhausting, but I would do it 1,000 times without complaining. At night, Daniel began to sleep deeply without nightmares. He would wake up calling me Daddy, naturally, as if he had always been here. Felipe proudly would say, "See, I told you he was my brother, now everyone knows." I began to hear laughter echoing through the house, see toys scattered around, and have someone to hug when I got home from work. It was chaotic, sometimes overwhelming, but it was perfect. Some people still look down on us, of course. There's always someone who prefers prejudice over affection, but I was so busy building our life together that I stopped caring. What mattered was inside our four walls. I started planning small renovations, a new bunk bed for their room, maybe a little wooden house in the yard. I wanted to give them everything I could. It didn't make up for the past, but it was the future I could offer. On lazy afternoons, the three of us would sit on the couch to watch cartoons. Daniel would rest his head on my shoulder. Felipe would sit on the other side, hugging his brother. Sometimes I would close my eyes just to make that moment last forever. It was then that I realized the pain I had lived through wasn't in vain. It had prepared me to love these boys with a strength I never knew I had. And to understand that family is much more than blood or paperwork. It's about choosing not to abandon someone. One night, after I'd put them both to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the nearly cold cup of coffee. I thought about Helena, the incredible woman who taught me what it meant to love unconditionally, the emptiness she left, and how mysteriously she continued to guide our steps. I remembered the times when I found myself talking to her, asking for advice, complaining about the weight of everything being left to me. Maybe she'd been answering all along, sending me signs through Felipe's dreams, through Daniel's gaze, through their embrace. The past hurt, of course. It would always hurt. But now it was a pain transformed into learning. I realized how everything was connected. The suffering, the longing, the fight. Everything had prepared me to be the father they needed. I also understood that fear would never completely disappear. We just learned to walk with it by our side, without letting it dictate the path. Every time I see Felipe and Daniel playing together, I feel that it was worth it not to give up. If I had ignored that first call, that strange sentence Felipe said while pointing to the boy in the alley, maybe Daniel would still be sleeping on the sidewalks. Maybe Felipe would still feel half of himself, and I, forever incomplete. Life is full of doors we're afraid to open, but sometimes behind them is exactly what we need. What makes everything finally make sense? Daniel was my door. Felipe, my key. I stood up from the chair, went to their room and watched the two of them sleeping, breathing in unison, as if they were one heart. I ran my hand through each of their hair and whispered, "Thank you, Helena, for giving me two miracles." I left the room with my chest overflowing with a love so deep it almost hurt. I wasn't the man who began this story anymore, sad, lost, afraid. Now I was a father of two. And that made me the richest man in the world. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in years, knowing that despite all the difficulties, I was exactly where I was meant to be. A few weeks later, I sat with Daniel in the yard, just the two of us. The sun was slowly setting, tinting the sky orange and pink. He seemed nervous, scratching his scraped knee. I spoke softly. "Is there something you want to tell me, son?" Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. "I remember her. Mommy. She used to sing to me when I slept on the streets. I didn't see her face, but I smelled her. It was warm, safe, like when you hugged me. Those words broke me in a sweet and painful way all at once. I held his small hand, rougher than it should have been for his age. She never left you, Daniel. Somehow she's always been with you, and now we're going to be together forever. He smiled, but soon his lip quivered and his eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, Felipe came running and threw himself into his brother's lap. I told you he was ours, Daddy. I knew it. Their embrace was so strong, so pure, that I felt like Helena was right there with us, smiling in satisfaction. Daniel looked at me with a gleam in his eyes that I had never seen before. Sorry if I ever thought you were going to leave me. I was scared. I hugged him tightly, almost crushing his thin little bones. Never, son. I will never leave you. It was in that moment that I felt the weight of forgiveness. Not just his, but mine as well, for all the mistakes, fears, and delays. Helena would have forgiven me too. Maybe she already had, from the very beginning. When we went inside, Felipe took Daniel's hand and led him to the picture frame in the living room. Look, this is Mommy. See how beautiful she is? Now we can be happy and she'll be happy too. Daniel ran his finger across the glass slowly, as if caressing the past. That night, we all slept together in the living room, huddled on an improvised mattress. It was tight, uncomfortable, but it was the most peaceful night of my life. I dreamt of Helena caressing our hair, saying, "Now you're complete." When I woke up, I saw Daniel and Felipe hugging each other, sleeping soundly, breathing in sync. And I thought, maybe the sky isn't just up there. Maybe it happens in moments like this, right here on Earth. Time passed, and little by little, the world outside started to accept our new family. The social services case was closed, and I finally got full custody of Daniel. I held the document in my hands with tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. That piece of paper was more than a right. It was confirmation of the love that already existed. The street changed too. The neighbors who had been so critical began to smile at Daniel, offer him candy, ask about school. Some even admitted their mistakes for having judged without knowing. Maybe they could now see how much that boy had grown strong and happy by our side. Felipe was living with joy, running around the yard with his brother, inventing new worlds. Daniel started calling their room our castle and said it was there he felt safe. The new bunk bed became a spaceship, a medieval fort, a secret hideout. One day, I ran into Father Antonio at the market. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "You turned a miracle into a home, Marcos. That's more than most people do in their entire life." I was speechless, only able to smile with a chest full of gratitude. Daniel received his first school report with high marks. Felipe made sure to shout for everyone to hear, "My brother is the smartest in the class." That's when I realized it wasn't just my victory, it was theirs, together. Even those who had once pointed fingers had to swallow their pride. Lourdes, the gossiping neighbor, came over with a cake and said awkwardly, "You have beautiful kids. God bless you." I accepted with a smile. I held no grudges. We had too much to celebrate. Sometimes I think about how different everything could have been if I had ignored Felipe's call that first night. Maybe Daniel would still be alone, suffering on the streets. Maybe Felipe would still feel like half of himself. But no, now we were whole. And seeing Daniel sleep peacefully, without fear of being taken away, was the greatest justice the universe could give me, the greatest reward. Because in the end, love always finds a way to win. Today, our house is loud, full of toys scattered around and laughter echoing through the hallways. Felipe and Daniel grew up together like twins of the soul, inseparable, accomplices in every discovery. It's messy, sometimes chaotic, but it's perfect. Daniel loves helping me fix things. He has the same curiosity I had at his age, but with an even bigger heart. Felipe is the dreamer, always saying he's going to build a spaceship so we can visit Mommy in the sky. On weekends, we have picnics in the yard, just the three of us and Tobias, who has become the official guardian of our happiness. There, sprawled out on the grass, I realize we don't need much to be complete. Little by little, I started helping other kids in the neighborhood. I organized donations, fixed up old toys, and talked to parents who were also afraid to open their hearts because of judgment. I didn't want anyone to go through what Daniel went through. Sometimes I get anonymous messages, stories from people who were inspired by ours. That moves me more than I can explain. If our path has served to light up other corners, then every tear was worth it. Felipe keeps saying that when he grows up, he wants to be like me, but with a bigger house to fit all the friends and siblings he decides to adopt along the way. Daniel laughs loudly and says he's going to be the engineer to build it all. Helena continues to be present, in their smiles, their gestures, even in the way Daniel whistles a tune that I swear sounds like the one she used to hum. Sometimes I think she's still whispering advice through the wind. Life didn't become perfect. We still have tight bills, silly fears, and difficult days. But now I know that happiness is exactly that, a bunch of imperfections surrounded by true love. And when I look at my two sleeping boys, I realize that we are just getting started. Our future is a blank book, ready to be written by those little hands that trust mine so much. If anyone ever asked me what the most important day of my life was, I wouldn't say it was the wedding or the birth of Felipe. I'd say it was that strange night when my son pointed to a dark alley and said, "Daddy, he was in Mommy's belly with me," because it was there that destiny knocked on my door, or better yet, screamed on the sidewalk, demanding the courage to open my heart. It was there that I understood that love isn't just what we feel, it's what we choose to do, even when trembling with fear. Many people spend their entire lives looking for great miracles, lights in the sky, divine signs. My miracle came in the form of a dirty boy with tired eyes who just wanted to be seen and loved, and I almost let him slip away. Today, I know that true wealth doesn't lie in vaults or bank accounts. It resides in the silly laughs before sleep, in the little hands that clutch me in the middle of the night, in the sound of "Daddy" spoken with confidence. If you who are listening to me now are afraid to open a door, to welcome, to surrender, do it anyway. Because sometimes what you fear is exactly what will fill the emptiness that lies within you. Helena left too soon, but she gave me the greatest gift she could. Two extraordinary children who teach me every day the power of surrender, forgiveness, and hope. Life will not always make sense. It will hurt. It will test you. It will break you. But when you choose to love despite everything, it will also rebuild you in a more beautiful way. So if one day you hear a strange call, a small voice saying, "See me, love me, accept me," don't ignore it. It might be your chance to transform your entire story. And remember, love is not perfect, but it's what makes life worth every second. Now, if you can, hug the one you love, because in the end, that's all that really matters.